John Frusciante, a name that already reverberates through the records of guitar history, stands tall as one of the most influential guitarists of the recent era. Whether weaving his sonic tapestry as a member of the legendary Red Hot Chili Peppers or embarking on his own solo odyssey, John garnered a devoted following, becoming the sonic savior for a whole new generation. Today, we embark on a melodic voyage, exploring the guitars that accompanied John on his extraordinary musical journey. As per usual, we'll focus on just 5 of his most iconic guitars. But for a more comprehensive list of his guitars and the rest of his gear, be sure to check out our website, groundguitar.com. The link will be in the description. Number 5, a 1957 Gretsch White Falcon. In 5th place, we have this amazing White Falcon, a guitar that Gretsch created solely as a showpiece to exhibit the craft of Gretsch's luthiers at the 1954 NAMM show. But the model became so popular that the company decided to put it into production the very next year. John's own Gretsch White Falcon was a 1957 model, featuring 2 Filtertron pickups and 2 toggle switches on the upper horn, one being a pickup selector and the other being a master tone selector. The story of this guitar begins in 1998, when the band was working on recording their first album since John's return, titled Californication. According to Anthony Kiedis, the band faced difficulties in finding the right melody and arrangement for what ended up being the title song, and they struggled for a significant period. Anthony even wrote that the band basically gave up on it, saying that they already have 25 other songs finished and ready to go. But Anthony felt that the song was special and needed to be finished. Luckily, everything changed when John arrived one day with his newly acquired White Falcon guitar, which according to John, he got from Vincent Gallo, the famous Hollywood actor and director. Using this guitar, John played the now iconic riff to the rest of the band, instantly transforming how everyone felt about the song. So obviously, the combination of John's musical talent and the unique sound of the White Falcon certainly played a crucial role in making the song happen. Without this specific mix of his style and the distinct qualities of the White Falcon, Californication would likely have sounded very different or might not have made it onto the album at all. Apart from that song, John also used the guitar to record the main melody of the song The Velvet Glove and most of Other Side, apart from the breakdown section on which he used a Gibson SG. He then picked it up again when the band started working on By the Way and recorded some parts of Tear on it. As far as Stadium Arcadium, John said that he didn't even take it out from its flight case. And regarding the new albums, it doesn't sound like the guitar made onto any songs either. Also, John obviously used the guitar live with the band, primarily just on Other Side and Californication, as the other songs didn't really make it onto the set list. It's also worth mentioning that the White Falcon appeared in the music video for John's own song titled Going Inside, but it's unknown whether he actually used it during the studio sessions. Now, back to the origin story behind this guitar. As said, John found it through Vincent Gallo, and apparently he wanted to get one ever since seeing Matthew Ashman of the English new wave band Bow Wow Wow play a similar model. He was also partially influenced by Malcolm Young, who of course played rhythm guitar in AC/DC on his famed Gretsch Jet Firebird nicknamed The Beast, but also owned and played a Projectosonic 6136 White Falcon himself. One thing on which we should focus on here is the part where John said that Gallo first sold the guitar to someone else, and then had trouble getting it back from that person, basically having to argue with them. This is important to mention because when John rejoined the band in 2019, a lot of the fans were surprised to see that he no longer played this guitar. Instead, he acquired another Gretsch White Falcon from 1958, very similar to the original Californication guitar, but featuring a Bigsby tremolo and a different set of pickups. So taking all this into account, one can perhaps speculate that maybe there were still unresolved problems related to the original sale of this guitar. Perhaps there were issues between Gallo and the person to whom he first sold it, and maybe in the end, the guitar still had to be returned. But according to the official information provided by John's current guitar tech Henry Trejo for the Guitar Player magazine, the original White Falcon was simply borrowed to John and was never actually his. So guess the lesson to take from all this is that if you're a guitar dealer and want to exponentially increase the value of your instrument, just borrow it to a professional musician, preferably one of the most influential guitarists of the recent era, and get his DNA on it. With some luck, he'll use it to write one of the biggest hits ever on it. And you got yourself a guitar that, instead of being valued at $30,000, is now basically a museum piece to be sold through an auction house. Now, a quick quiz question for real John Frusciante fans. Do you know what was the first guitar that John had when he joined the Red Hot Chili Peppers in 1988? Hint: no, it was not a Stratocaster. Stay tuned as we'll reveal the answer later on in the video. Number 4. A 1960 Fender Telecaster Custom. This 1960 Fender Telecaster began its life with John probably approximately around the same time as the previously mentioned Gretsch White Falcon. However, stories differ a little bit on this, because according to John's old guitar tech Dave Lee, he actually got it around the By the Way era at Norm's Rare Guitars. But if we look at the footage from concerts from around 1999, it's obvious that John had the guitar way before By the Way was released. Also, if we look at various interviews that John gave around the time of Californication release, he often mentioned using a Telecaster on some of the songs. For instance, in a September 1999 interview with Guitar One, he mentioned that he used a Telecaster on songs Easily and Scar Tissue. And in a July 1999 interview with Guitar World, he said that he was inspired to use a Telecaster because Syd Barrett and Jimmy Page both played one, and those were his favorite guitarists at that time. In addition to the two songs already mentioned, he also utilized this Telecaster for recording Can't Stop, and he played the guitar on his solo album, Shadows Collide with People. But also around this time, circa 2004, John said that this Telecaster was his favorite guitar, both in terms of sound, comfort, and looks. Usually John would say that about his 1962 Stratocaster, but it does seem that at least during this period, the Telecaster was his main. As far as the specs of this guitar, as outlined in a Japanese magazine and confirmed by recent photos published in Guitar Player magazine, John's Telecaster bears the serial number 45959. This suggests that it was manufactured in 1960. This is also confirmed by the fact that the guitar has a slab rosewood fretboard, as opposed to veneer, which means that it had to have been built between 1959 and mid-1962. This is important to mention because sometimes in the interviews, John will refer to this guitar as a 1966 Telecaster, and other times as a 1963, but the serial number and the fretboard are key giveaways that that isn't the case. This could be him just not really caring about these details, or there's a slight chance that he could be referring to a different Tele, the one he gave to Josh Klinghoffer after he replaced John in the Peppers. There is another intriguing aspect about this guitar that deserves attention. John's Telecaster features a unique characteristic, a Fender F character on the pickguard, which is not commonly seen on this particular model. This is not a mere sticker, but appears to be a part of the pickguard material itself. So, if anyone has any information about whether Fender has ever incorporated such embedded logos on their own pickguards, and the specific year they did so, kindly share it in the comments section below. Quiz time again. Did you know the answer to the quiz question? Well, if you didn't, John's first guitar when he joined the Red Hot Chili Peppers was a Performance Custom. This was a custom-built guitar by a Los Angeles, Tokyo-born luthier Kuni Sugai, who prior to starting his own shop worked at the Fender factory. John's performance guitar had an HSS configuration, and reportedly, it was adorned with various images of naked women, according to those who have seen it. John had the guitar at least until around 1993 when it was shown in Johnny Depp's famous documentary called Stuff, recorded at John's house. However, after that point, the guitar seems to have disappeared without a trace, leaving its whereabouts unknown. Number 3. Martin 015. The story of John's love for Martin 015 guitars actually involves two different guitars, which can be a bit confusing. The first 015 guitar that John encountered was borrowed around the time the band started working on the Californication album. This particular guitar played a significant role in helping John rediscover his musical inspiration and regain his creative flow. It became a tool for him to reconnect with playing the guitar and reignite his songwriting process after being away from it for several years in the mid-90s. But shortly after the band began touring around 2000, John acquired another Martin 015 guitar, which was essentially identical to the first one. According to Dave Lee, the second 015 was bought at Norm's Rare Guitars, the same establishment where John purchased his Fender Telecaster, and Dave promptly installed a trance audio amulet pickup system in it. And shortly after that, in 2001, there are videos of John performing live where he can be seen switching between the two 015 guitars during the set. This serves as confirmation that even though the first guitar was initially borrowed, it remained in John's possession. Therefore, the second Martin was not purchased because he was required to return the first one. Additionally, this confirms that by that time, the first Martin also had a pickup installed, as John can be observed unplugging a jack from one guitar and plugging it into the other. Regarding the ownership of the original 015 guitar, John explains that it was initially given to Anthony by Rick Rubin and then lent to John. However, according to John's guitar technician Dave Lee, the guitar actually still belonged to Rick. Regardless, the first 015 guitar served as John's primary instrument during the early 2000s. It was used extensively on his solo album To Record Only Water for 10 Days, and was likely the guitar he appeared with in the music video for the song Road Trippin'. However, from 2002 onwards, it becomes increasingly unclear which guitar John used on specific albums. In an interview around the time of the release of Curtains, it seems that he was switching between all of his small-body Martin guitars, and what mattered most was having at least one of them with him. However, it is evident that John's second 015 guitar is utilized significantly more frequently, especially in public appearances. It is featured in both the Vintage Guitar interview following the release of the Empyrean album and the 2022 feature published by Guitar World magazine. If you want to know how to differentiate the two guitars, John's personal Martin has notable scratches on its body and a distinct pattern on the pickguard. On the other hand, the Rick Rubin Martin guitar bears a noticeable scratch on the top of its body, situated just behind the bridge. This scratch can be observed during the Slane Castle concert, which stands out as one of the rare occasions when John played the Rick Rubin Martin during a large-scale performance. Regarding the specs of John's 015 guitars, it's very hard to tell when exactly they were made. The first production run of the 015, from March 1940 to October 1943, reportedly had tortoise shell-colored headstock veneers, which neither of John's Martins possesses. Hence, both of John's 015s were likely produced sometime after 1948, when the second production run of the 015 model commenced. What is known, though, is that both guitars, of course, featured all mahogany bodies and necks, and rosewood fretboards and bridges. It does seem, though, that based on the photos, John's own 015 had its bridge replaced with a new one at some point because it appears to be way too light and shiny for an old vintage bridge. It's also worth noting that the 015 model, when initially introduced by Martin, was essentially a budget-friendly option, often considered a student model. It was available for a price of $25, which, when adjusted for inflation, would be roughly equivalent to around $500 in today's currency. To put things into perspective, nowadays, vintage 015 guitars from that period are highly sought after, and it is rare to find one being sold for less than $5,000. Number 2, a 1955 Fender Stratocaster. This 1955 Fender Stratocaster became John's faithful companion during the creation of the iconic Californication album, and since then, it has lent its melodic prowess to the vast majority of Red Hot Chili Peppers albums and live performances. In a September 1999 interview with Guitar Player magazine, John explained that he was particularly fond of how the neck felt on this specific guitar, and due to this, he designated it as one of his two primary guitars for touring at that time. This is intriguing because it's evident that John typically leans towards playing Stratocasters from the early 60s, which all, of course, have rosewood fretboards. So the 1955 Strat with the maple fretboard stands out as an exception to this trend. John, of course, made extensive use of this Stratocaster over the different tours. He played it on the Zephyr Song at the Slane Castle concert, Give It Away at the Woodstock Festival, and during the most recent tours on both older tracks such as Suck My Kiss and newer ones like These Are the Ways and Aquatic Mouth Dance. Generally, there doesn't appear to be a strict rule dictating which songs this guitar must be used on, as John seems to employ it whenever he deems appropriate. This guitar also played a significant part in John's solo album, The Empyrean. During an interview with Guitar Magazine Japan around the album's release, John shared that, at that particular stage of his career, the 1955 Stratocaster, along with the 1962 Stratocaster, were his two favorite guitars. As far as the specs and the origin story, John most likely got this guitar through Vincent Gallo sometime around 1998. According to the information disclosed in a Japanese magazine, the guitar bears the serial number 6793. This places its manufacturing year within the range of either 1954 or 1955. However, due to some overlap in serial numbers during those 2 years, it is challenging to pinpoint the exact year with certainty. It appears that some models with serial numbers larger than 6,000 were produced in 1954, while others were made in 1955. As far as the hardware, in an interview with Vintage Guitar in April 2009, John mentioned that for a significant period, he believed the pickups in the guitar to be original. However, upon closer examination, it was discovered that they were actually Seymour Duncan pickups. While he didn't specify the exact model, John did mention that they were vintage Strat pickups, leading to a reasonable assumption that they were probably the SSL once. However, according to a recent interview with Total Guitar published in May 2022, John's 1955 Stratocaster now features custom-wound pickups crafted by Paul Waller from the Fender Custom Shop. According to the interview, the Fender pickups are louder and better matched, meaning that they probably have a higher DC resistance and are somewhat closer to the modern pickups than to vintage-oriented SSL once. Be that as it may, John's 1955 Stratocaster holds a special place in his collection, and it stands as a testament to the enduring relationship between a musician and their instrument. While it may sometimes be overshadowed by its more famous counterpart, John's 1962 Strat, this guitar holds its own unique charm and history and deserves to be at the very top of this list. Number 1. A 1962 Fender Stratocaster. If you're at all familiar with John Frusciante, you probably already knew which guitar would be in the first place. Yes, it's John's famous, battered, and well-worn 1962 Fender Stratocaster that he used on pretty much every single Red Hot Chili Peppers album and concert since 1998. And the guitar on which his signature model would without a doubt be based on, should he ever decide to collaborate with Fender. The story behind this guitar's origin goes back to when John rejoined the Red Hot Chili Peppers. At that time, the only guitar he possessed was a red 1962 Fender Jaguar, which he had purchased as a Christmas gift for himself from Voltage Guitars in 1997. During the early 90s, John had owned numerous guitars, but many were pawned off over the years, and unfortunately, a significant portion was lost in a fire that engulfed his house in the mid-90s. So, when he rejoined the band in 1998 and the band started working on new material, it became evident that he needed a proper Stratocaster. The Jaguar was undoubtedly a fantastic guitar, but the Stratocaster was synonymous with the signature sound of the Red Hot Chili Peppers, as Hillel Slovak, as well as John himself in the early days, played a Strat. So, John went out to the Guitar Center with Anthony Kiedis, and Anthony bought him this 1962 Stratocaster. According to Anthony, the guitar was a gift, while John's account suggests that Anthony likely loaned him the money to make the purchase, which he presumably repaid later. Regardless of the exact arrangement, this guitar quickly became John's cherished possession. In his own words, it became an inseparable extension of his body, a means for him to express himself in the most authentic and genuine way possible. It became his ultimate tool for artistic expression and a source of immense pride. During the recording of the Californication and Stadium Arcadium albums, John used the guitar sparingly. However, it took center stage alongside his Telecaster as his primary instrument on the By the Way album. Additionally, it continued to feature prominently on the Red Hot Chili Peppers' more recent releases, as confirmed by John himself in the May 2022 issue of Total Guitar magazine. John's Stratocaster is widely recognized for its heavily worn finish, particularly around the area above the pickguard and on the back. This distinct appearance is the result of years of extensive use and is characteristic of the early vintage Strats. Fender had utilized a brittle nitrocellulose finish during that time, which did not age gracefully. Many famous guitars from this era, including Stevie Ray Vaughan's renowned Strat and Rory Gallagher's Strat, exhibit similar wear patterns. This trait has become so iconic that nowadays, one can actually purchase brand new guitars that are intentionally relicked at the factory. Some argue that this relicking process significantly affects the instrument's sound, but most just prefer it because of the looks. A notable example is John Mayer, whose signature Stratocaster, known as the Black One, is produced with a minimal finish intentionally applied at the factory to create a worn-in appearance. In addition to this, it is important to note that Frusciante's 1962 Strat is not completely stock, as it underwent some modifications over the years. The most important modification pertains to the pickups, as for a significant period of time, the original pickups were not installed in the guitar. Rumors circulated that they were replaced in the early 2000s with Seymour Duncan SSL-1s, the same set John used in his 1955 Strat. However, Dave Lee, John's guitar technician, has claimed that they actually installed a standard set of Fender pickups, which surprised many people. This is pretty comical actually, because it was pretty much accepted as a fact for a number of years that John's 62 Strat had SSL-1 pickups, leading to probably thousands of sales for Seymour Duncan. As an update to all that, in the May 2022 issue of Total Guitar, it is revealed that Frusciante's guitar now features the original hand-wound pickups, and that the guitar is now equipped with an Gretsch electronics hum-canceling system. As the name implies, this system effectively eliminates the single-coil hum that can be quite bothersome during live performances. In conclusion, John Frusciante's iconic 1962 Fender Stratocaster holds immense significance to him, both as a musician and as an artist. Its distinct worn appearance, coupled with its modifications over the years, exemplify its unique character and journey alongside John. This guitar has been a trusted companion, allowing John to express himself authentically and create the signature sounds that have left a lasting impact on the Red Hot Chili Peppers music. It stands as a symbol of John's artistic evolution, embodying the raw emotions and soulful tones that have resonated with fans around the world. Considering this guitar's rich history and its role in shaping John's musical legacy, it is highly likely that this instrument will become one of the most iconic Stratocasters ever played, especially to the generation growing up in the 90s and 2000s.